Hello and welcome back to another Python challenge. This challenge is a little bit complicated to explain, so I will try to explain it to you and then I will show it to you and we'll work from there. Okay, so imagine you wanted to keep a running total, of an input. So what we're trying to do here is create a program that allows users to constantly type in inputs. Now there should be two types of inputs here, I or O. And each input is referenced when the user types in as I or O. So the idea here is that we have a running total and the user wants to input something. So they use the I keyword and then dash and then a number they want to input. And the system will take that number and then add it to the quantity and show them that current quantity. Now the program should continue. It should not break at this point. It should continue and allow the user now to type in more into the input. So the user should now be able to type in something else and they can use the I or the O, whether they want to input or output from the quantity. So let's imagine now the user wants to output a number. Output. So the quantity should be reduced. So now the user types in O dash and then the number they want to take out of that quantity. And so the idea is that we're going to create a running total of this quantity as user types in. Now the challenge here, of course, is trying to extract the number from the input. That's one of the challenges here. And other things to think about. So every time the user types in a new value, we should output to the user the current quantity. And then when the user finishes, they should be allowed to, or there should be a way for them to break the program and then to finish. And then we should then print to the terminal the final quantity. So this is what it's going to look like. Right, let's start the program up. Example 2. Okay, so the user is presented with a blank line. We could add something there, of course. So the user needs to type in the prefix of I or O. So let's go ahead and input something and then dash and then the number we want to input. And you can see we now have a new total 10. So that's the current quantity. Now notice that the program hasn't broke. We still have access to the terminal here. So we can enter something else. So let's go for an O, not 0, an letter O. And then let's just remove out. So we're going to take out 5 and then we now have a new total of 5. Now when we want to break the program, not break the program, I'm using that keyword. When we want to stop the program, we can just press enter and you can now see that we're presented with the final quantity, which is 5. And there we have it. So that's what you need to try to replicate. Okay, so hopefully you've had a go. Now remember, this is a beginner's challenge and I am trying to present code to you that is very readable for beginners. Now, if you have got any changes, if you want to make any changes to the example that I show you, then please leave comments. And it's always good to get other people's commentary on what they think is a more effective way of completing the challenge. So let's get started then. New file. So we're going to need to keep a running total. So let's go ahead and just create a new variable here. So it's going to be an integer. So let's start with 0. So that's a global variable, which we're going to update every time the user enters either an input or an output. So what you saw in the preview then is that we had this ability of remaining in the terminal so we could enter more information. So this is going to be achieved by utilizing, one way this is going to be achieved by utilizing a while loop. So if we set the while loop to true, that means, of course, this while loop will just loop forever. So if we were to print something here and we were to run this code, then this while loop would remain true forever and we would just continue printing this. Now, I probably don't need to show you that. Okay, so while then, let's just use arbitrary X here. So let's go for an input. So what's going to happen here is we're going to ask the user to input and then we're going to store that input in X. Now remember, we are asking the user to type in one of two things, either an input, which should be I, or an output. Probably not the right terminology here, but you get the idea. You could change that to whatever you like, of course. Right, so that's what they need to type in. I have an input and output. And then what we want to try and achieve is we want to be able to allow them to continue typing something. So let's just see what happens here. Oh, okay. So if we run this, we can enter something. You can see that we can just continually enter. Because we're using a while loop, we've set it to true, therefore we're not breaking that loop, we're just going to continue forever. Now obviously we don't want to continue forever, we want a way of being able to stop this loop. And we can do that by, one of the ways we can do that is, for example, if the user doesn't type anything in, then that could be an indication that they finished. Now we could have a keyword here. We could ask the user to type in a keyword, end, exit, and we could capture that keyword, of course. But alternatively, we could just create an if statement. So if not X, so we're saying that if there is no value in X, if the user hasn't typed in something, then there won't be any value saved. Then X will be empty, in which case we can then break the loop. So let's go ahead and break. So now, let me just restart the program. We can see that when we type something in, we're all okay. But when we don't type something in, you can see that we can then break the loop. So now we need to think about working with the format that was prescribed in the challenge introduction. So we're asking users to type in the key here, I or 0, I or O, and then the format is a dash and then a number. So that's the format that's expected here. So we need a way of being able to extract the number so that we can perform the calculations. So potentially what we have here is a key value, or alternatively, we could utilize a dictionary, or we could utilize a list. So there's options here. So let's just go ahead and we'll utilize a list in this case, but it'd be interesting to see if you can convert this to utilize a dictionary. Right, so let's get the value. Let's get the number of the value. So n value equals. So what we can do here is we can take X and we could use split again. We've been using that a few different times in the previous tutorials. And we want to split here. And basically what we're doing here, you can see that we're going to split. If we were to enter I0, we're going to essentially remove the dash and split here and save the I and the N, so the number and the actual letter. So what we end up here is with a list. So split will create a list for us. One part of the list, or the first element in the list, will be I. The second element will be the number. So you can go ahead and print that out and have a look to see if that works. If you're not too familiar with utilizing split, so I1, and you can see here we have a string, sorry, we have a list here, I on the left and then 1 on the right. So now we have to determine whether we're working with an input or an output. So here we can create an if statement. So we need to work out whether we're utilizing an I or an O. So let's think about it. So let's just grab, for example, well, what we've done here is we've added these two characters to our list here. So we can just go into that list now and we can extract it. So we know that position 1 in this, so position 0 here in our list, we have I. In position 1, we have the number 1. So we could, for example, say n value position 0. If position 0 is equal to I for input, then we're going to update the quantity. So let's grab the quantity, the current quantity, plus equals. So we're going to add something to it, and this is going to be an integer. And that's going to be n value. So remember, we're going back into our list now, and the value is going to be in position 1. So we're going to say n value, the value in position 1. So that's now going to update the quantity corresponding to the value that's been entered. So we could now go ahead and just print out as we're asked to. So just use an F string here. So new total. And then let's just bring in the quantity here. Okay, so that's going to show the quantity to the user. So let's just see that in action. So we need an input here, and that's going to be 10. And you can now see the new quantity is 10. So we can do the same thing again for, oh, we can do an else if, sorry. Yep, so we can do the same thing again for the, if we want to take something out or remove something from our quantity. So this is going to be a else if. So if n value equals O, then what we want to do is obviously remove, subtract, and that's going to be n value 1. And then we print out the total again. So let's give this a go. Oh, let's close that. Okay, so we've got an input of 10, and then let's go for an output of 5. And there we go. So we have a new total of 5. So we can close. So now what we want to do is we could have an else if we wanted to. We could just pass that. Maybe we want to do something in the future. I'm just going to remove it for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure it's outside of the function block, the print, so we don't want to indent this. So this is going to happen once we break. So when we break this loop, this piece of code here is going to run, and that's going to be a print. So let's print off the final outcome. So the final quantity, apology, I get it right. Final quantity is the quantity. Maybe have a space. We give this a go. So we can already see from the previous that it was going to work okay. Output 5, and then there we go. So what can we do to enhance this code? That's something that maybe you can start thinking about, because we need to think about what might break this code. You know, what can we do to make this code a little bit more robust in different situations? So thinking about testing our applications, we need to think about, well, the types of inputs that people might accidentally enter or try to enter to break our application. So, you know, if we typed in something random, what would happen? It looks like it handles it okay, but maybe we need to think about error control here and capture different events such as this, and just remind the customer or the user of the correct input format. Okay, so there we go. Another challenge. Love to hear your comments and thoughts, and if you have any changes you want to make or additions you think would be interesting for others to know about, or if you did want to take that piece of code and make it more robust, it's always good to hear from you in the comments. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you in another tutorial.